What are the 9 worst packing mistakes that cruisers can and do make that could also get them into a lot of trouble? I'm Gary Bembridge. This is another of my tips for travelers. I'm going to explore 9 packing mistakes that could end up getting you into a lot of trouble. Starting with this one. Drugs. Bringing on board drugs could get you into a lot of trouble. Now, there's the obvious ones, which are illegal drugs. And people have been caught on cruise ships surprisingly often. For example, even in the last year, there was a couple aged 71 and 72 called Roger and Sue Clark, some pensioners from the UK that were arrested in Lisbon carrying many kilograms, 20 pounds of cocaine. They got up to 8 years. Also the same year, there were 2 men arrested trying to bring drugs on board the Allure of the Seas in Miami. And there was another famous case where a group of girls who were known as the Instagram cruise drug babes were arrested in Sydney trying to smuggle drugs on Princess cruises. So obviously, of course, bringing on board illegal drugs is a big issue. However, you also need to be extremely careful with prescription or even over-the-counter drugs, because in some places you're cruising to, you might actually find that they're also illegal. So for example, if you're cruising into Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, there's a lot of drugs which you can get very simply are illegal. So any drugs, for example, with codeine. So even very simple drugs like Tylenol, arthritis relief is illegal in that country and get you in a lot of trouble. A gentleman was arrested and held in prison for many months for trying to bring temazepam into the United Arab Emirates. In Japan, again, there's lots of restrictions as well. So even Sudafed, for example, you have an issue bringing into Japan. So very importantly, if you are going on a cruise and you have either OTC drugs, drugs you just bought over the counter, check that you can actually bring those into the country, particularly if you're disembarking. And if you have a prescription drug that you're taking with you, my big strong tip is keep it in the original packaging so they can see your name, and ideally also have a copy of your prescription or a letter from your doctor. But be careful, those very simple drugs that you bring on board could get you into a lot of trouble. The second area that could get you into a lot of trouble if you pack them are remote control devices or things that can be launched off a ship. So very simple, balloons are no longer allowed on most cruise lines. You can't bring balloons on board because of the concern that you'll release those balloons off a ship and it will endanger marine life. If you want to bring a drone on a cruise, you're pretty much excluded by all cruise lines. I've tried many times to get drones on board. Very few cruise lines will actually even let you bring them on board. Some cruise lines will let you hand them over to security and they will let you when you get on and off the ship. But pretty much every single cruise ship will ban drones. They'll ban also things like remote controlled aircraft. At the point of time of recording, Royal Caribbean and Carnival are the only ones that will let you bring drones on board, normally keep them with security, and they will let you use them when you head off on a port. I've tried many times with cruise lines to bring my drone on board, and even with lots of guarantees, working even with the PR teams, it is refused. And what will happen is you'll find it's confiscated and you'll only get it back at the end of the cruise. The third area that could cause a lot of problems for you is not packing for the dress code. Depending on the cruise you go on, they will have different restrictions. So if you're heading, for example, on a very formal cruise, so you could be on Cunard or you could be Princess, Holland America, they have formal nights where they require, for example, gentlemen to wear jackets, normally with a tie or a tuxedo. They'll require ladies to wear very elegant gowns. So you can't get into any of the key dining venues without that dress code. Also, some cruise lines will also not let you go into the public areas. They won't even let you go and watch the show or go to the casino or whatever if you're not in the dress code. So really importantly, make sure that you've packed for the dress code. Of course, the converse is true. If you're going on a nice relaxed cruise, you don't want to be bringing all your fancy gear because you may not get a chance to wear it. Also, very importantly, understand if there's any other restrictions. So for example, 1 or 2 cruise lines have banned fancy dress. This is after they've had a whole lot of problems with probably not inappropriate fancy dress. So some cruise lines are really strict around fancy dress and clothing, particularly with slogans. They will only let you bring on fancy dress relevant to a particular theme. And those themes tend to be fairly innocuous, like white night party or red, white and blue. So also bear in mind, you may not be able to bring that fancy dress. Also, depending where you're going, don't pack camouflage gear. Some islands, particularly even in the Caribbean, will not let you wear camouflage gear out and about. So really important, understand the dress code. Also, if you or your kids have things like those shoes with little wheels on, most cruise lines also don't allow those. So when you're packing, also have a think around the dress code and also check if your particular cruise line has any quirks around what you can wear. So for example, some cruise lines will let you wear jeans to dinner if they're dark, smart jeans. They won't let you wear faded or ripped jeans. So that's something really important to bear in mind, the dress code. Another really big packing mistake that I have seen a lot of people make is by packing valuables and things that they really don't want to lose in their check-in bags. Make sure that you keep all of those in your carry-on bags. I've had people contacting me talking about they've had really valuable equipment in their check-on bags which have either gone missing or have been damaged, and then they've had no recourse for those. So really important things like your passports, medications, if you've got camera equipment, laptops, smartphones, anything that is valuable, even your precious jewels if you're taking those for some reason on a cruise with you. So really important, if you have anything valuable, whether it's even sentimental value, keep that with you in your carry-on bags. Do not put it in the bags that you hand in. Another really important no-no when it comes to packing is don't pack anything that has an open flame or is flammable. So you can't bring fireworks or anything like that. But also you can't bring candles, you can't bring incense burners. So anything with live flames are not allowed on a cruise ship. Fire is the thing that cruisers and captains and crew fear more than anything else. It is the most dangerous thing to happen at sea. So all live flames are banned. So for example, you might have seen in a restaurant, they have little fake flames and things like that to avoid having live flames. The only time you'll ever see live flames is if you're on one of those cruises where they do some flambés, you know, crepes Suzettes or duck or whatever at your table. And then they're really strictly controlled with a fire blanket and fire extinguishers and all that kind of stuff. So anything that's even vaguely flammable, do not pack in your bags. The next tip is also a little bit linked to that. You can't bring on pretty much any cruise anything that has some sort of heating element to it. So you find whilst most cruise lines will let you bring on board hair dryers, not all of them, some of them might even let you bring on curling tongs, but not all of them. But you can't bring on things like irons, you know, travel irons, kettles, coffee makers, hot plates, anything bizarre like that. Anything that's got a heating element, you cannot bring that on board. Also very important, if you are traveling with kids, particularly very young kids, and you need a bottle sterilizer or a bottle warmer, check if your cruise line lets you bring that. So for example, even Disney does not allow parents to bring on sterilizers and bottle warmers. They require you to either work with your cabin steward, or you can talk to guest relations and they will give you some equipment, but you can't bring your own on board. So anything that's got a heating element, don't bring on board, because they will check for that, they will screen for that, and they will confiscate it. Also, if you're heading off on a celebratory cruise, you know, particularly Christmas or something like that, you can't even bring those light strings, you know, the sort of Christmas lights and things like that. They will not let you bring on board. The next packing mistake is around packing anything that is or could be perceived as being some kind of weapon or could be used as a weapon. This is very important because although there's the obvious things, you can't bring shotguns and pistols, that kind of stuff, or big long knives with you. There's a bunch of things that you might end up bringing on board that could get you into trouble without realizing it. So for example, you can't bring on board replicas. So if your kids have kind of replica guns or whatever, you probably find those are not allowed. You can't bring those on board. There's also lots of restrictions on self-defense equipment. So if you perhaps want to bring some handcuffs with you for whatever reason, or pepper spray, those kind of things, you can't bring those either with you. But surprisingly, you also can't bring along things that are actually sports equipment that could be used as weapons. So you can't bring things like cricket bats, baseball bats, anything that looks like a club, basically. You'll find that cruise lines will not let you bring that on board. If they find that in your luggage, they will take it out and they will confiscate it and give it to you at the end of the cruise. If it comes to things like knives and sharp objects, most of the rules say that you can't bring any knife that is longer than 4 inches long, or that's around about 10 centimeters. The only exception to that are those old-fashioned safety razors. But again, if you are bringing that on board, you might find you have some difficulties. So anything that's perceived as or could be a weapon is restricted and would be a big mistake to pack. Another big packing mistake is bringing too much alcohol with you. Now, I have done a video before where I talk about the great lengths that people will go to smuggle booze on board. Most cruise lines will allow you to bring either one or sometimes two bottles of wine or champagne on board with you per person within your luggage. Anything over that, they will clamp down on and they will take it away. So if you're out on an excursion and you're going to a winery or you're just buying some alcohol, spirits, wine, champagne, whatever it is, when you come back on board, the cruise line will take that away from you and they'll hold it till the end of the cruise. So very importantly, when you're packing, you need to be really careful about how much booze you bring on board. Some cruise lines are even restrict things like water, sodas, that kind of stuff. So make sure you really understand what you are allowed to pack so you don't get into trouble. My next tip is around the whole area of musical equipment and instruments. Pretty much every single cruise line will allow you to bring on board a musical instrument, and you are allowed to play that unless they get complaints. So you can bring on board musical instruments and you can play those in your cabin. Don't play them out on deck. I've been on cruises with people who do that and it's really annoying. And is certainly one way that's going to irritate other passengers. When it comes to things for playing music, you'll find that pretty much every single cruise line will not let you pack and bring big boom boxes. They will let you bring on board smaller musical devices, which they ask that you only play within your cabin. You can only listen to music, your own music, out on deck with earphones. You can't play it out loud. You are only supposed to play within your cabin. And again, if you get complaints from your neighbors, it will be taken away from you. I've done a video before about music being played on balconies. Music being played on balconies is not something that cruise lines will encourage, or in fact, if you get complaints, you will find your equipment taken away from you. When packing for a cruise, really important that you avoid these mistakes so you don't get yourself into a pickle and into trouble. These are the 9 mistakes that I have seen people make all the time, and some of them are quite easy to make. Hope you found that helpful. I have many more videos of cruise tips, so why don't you watch another one of those right now.